Hi, Shannon. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, for those watching that may not know you already, Shannon Harvey is an award winning director of two internationally acclaimed documentaries, including The Connection, Mind Your Body, and then her most recent film, My Year of Living Mindfully. And she's also written books and has, beyond being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, has found a pathway towards peace and comfort through the practice of mindfulness. So she's the recipient of the National Press Club of Australia's Health Journalist of the Year, and now produces a popular blog as well on balancing health and life. And she's also the mother of two fantastic and adventurous young boys. So great to have you. Also, as far as me, Laura Baykosh, I'm the co-founder of Inner Explorer, and we are a nonprofit organization, and we bring daily mindfulness practice to children in school, from 3 years old all the way through 18 years old. And so we're super interested in this work, and we're so excited to have a chance to talk to you today. So I have some questions, and I hope you're ready to answer them.
I'm so ready. Yeah, thank you.
So first, I absolutely loved the film. I was so taken by the fact that you balanced the science of mindfulness as well as presented your lived experience. And I thought it was a really, really powerful blending of those two things, and for people, to really understand what the science means to a person. So my first question is, do you still practice
Of
every day?
course. Yes. Yeah, about three-quarters of the way through the film, you probably realized that it was evident that regardless of what scientists found, that I would keep practicing. That kind of changes in my life and in my day-to-day experience were so profound that, yeah, it was pretty clear that this was not going to be my year of living mindfully, but rather my mindful lifetime. So I'm just about to come. Today is day 996 of my year of living mindfully. I'm about to have my 1,000 day anniversary. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That is a huge, huge step. That is so great. I do find when I talk to people, once they get through that hump that you kind of described in the movie, that you don't really like it, you're not sure if you're doing it right, you're not sure if it's going to make a difference. You kind of hit that point, and then it's forever after that. So I myself have been practicing for 27 years now, so quite a long time. And literally, if I skip a day, I really do feel it. Just kind of, it's hard to describe, but it's just things don't go as smoothly. So you stay committed because you just really do feel different.
I know exactly what you mean by that. Like, I use the analogy that it's a lot like exercise in the sense that, say you go to the gym regularly for a while, and at first, like, you don't like it and your body feels sore, and, it's just, you don't know if it's really the thing you want to do. And then eventually you kind of start feeling the benefits in your day-to-day life, and it's easier to pick up your kids or to carry groceries or whatever it is. And then after a while you kind of really like it, and you're motivated intrinsically to do it. But then, when you stop going to the gym, you actually notice your fitness levels kind of tapering off. And
Yeah.
it's really similar with my mindfulness training. I actually can really feel the dose experience with it. So my goal is to meditate for 45 minutes a day, because that's kind of the dose that I worked out throughout my year of living mindfully. But when I go through periods of kind of tapering back on that, I actually really notice a difference. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel the same exact way. And people do refer to it as brain fitness. So, kind of to your analogy, it's like a workout for the brain where you can stay sort of healthy and level and ready, for the next challenge. So, and with that idea, has your family begun practicing? Does your husband or your children or any other family members join in at all?
Yeah, I mean, not many people have seen the film yet. So, obviously, Jules, who is my co producer on the film, and he's the editor of the film, and he actually shot probably about 80% of the film as well. So, he's very embedded in this project, and he really gets it. He's a mountaineer, so he also has a real understanding about, I guess, it's hard to describe. For example, he spent 6 weeks stranded in Antarctica in a tent with nothing but a broken iPod and a book that didn't have the last page. I think it was a John Grisham novel too. So I think he really understands what it's like to come to understand and know your mind, and he takes time out intentionally every day to experience solitude, have moments free from other stimulus. But the other people in my life, I think I'm really conscious that I don't want to become evangelical. And I think mindfulness is the sort of thing that people have to feel, well, for me as well, I really had to feel that I was coming to it on my own and that nobody was telling me I should. So a few people in my life have sort of downloaded apps and they're getting curious, but nobody really in my life, first of all, not many people have seen the film. So that'll be interesting to know once people start seeing the film if they change.
It'll be like the Shannon effect where the downloads go way up.
I spoke recently to a woman who's a psychologist who founded an insight meditation group here in Australia, who's been meditating for 8 years, and she has a scientist husband who watched the film together, and he has started meditating after seeing the film. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Right. I think the format that you laid out made it so accessible for people. It really did kind of map out the journey in a really remarkable way. So hopefully we do see that Shannon effect and we see a lot more people joining in. And you mentioned in the movie that you wish you had learned when you were younger. And as I mentioned, that's kind of our field, which is trying to teach kids early in life before they get traumatized. So what are your thoughts on that? What could you have seen doing it as a young kid? And tell me more about that.
There's all this discussion in academic papers about the importance of defining what mindfulness is. And many people kind of refer to John Kabat-Zinn's classic definition, and that's a starting point for many people. Other scientists kind of want to try to have a mechanistic definition, and there's a lot of debate about it. And I realized when I was doing my silent retreat that I've got my own definition of what mindfulness is now, and it is simply training to hear myself think. And what I mean by that is hearing in the sense of really hearing, not as in like just listening in order to respond, but actually hearing and really absorbing and really taking in what is occurring. And that's what I'm really talking about at the end of the film, where I talk about how I wish I had been taught this at a much younger age. The skill, and I do think it's a skill, but the skill of being able to hear ourselves think, and in some ways to not believe everything that I think. Like that is a really it's a skill. It's a lot like reading, and something that I do really wish that I had been taught at a younger age. I think my life would have been really different. Yeah.
It's such an interesting topic. People sometimes refer to that as habits of mind, right? You talked about the narrative and that kind of thing, and how a lot of us get conditioned through early experiences, through what people may have said to us in the past. I might have been the slow one in my family, or the athletic one, or the booky one, and you take some of those messages from your community, from your family of origin, from your friends, and that stays with us. And a lot of times we hook into some of the negative comments and feedback and experiences, and that plays over and over, and those habits of mind start to take over, and without question they really can start to consume you. Though that's what many psychologists believe is kind of the root of, they call them like diseases of despair. I don't know if you've heard that term, but the idea that addiction and suicide and depression and anxiety have a very similar root. And it's that inability to kind of like get the mind under control. A lot of people believe, well, they don't really realize that the mind is controlling them. And through mindfulness, you understand that the mind is one part of you and it's not all of you, and that it is worthy of exploration, right? Because when you can start to deeply hear what you're saying to yourself, you can begin to evaluate whether that's all true. And if it's not true, you start to be able to, in a real way, rework that. You know, if you say, I'm not good enough, and I say, yes, you are, you're wonderful, you aren't going to believe that. But if you come to the point where you say, I'm not good enough, and you hear it and you kind of go, well, is that true? Am I not? And then you kind of go, well, maybe I am good enough, or maybe I can, and that's where the magic happens. That's where the transformation starts to be able to change. So,
it's I, as part of the project and in the film, I met and got to know Judson Brewer quite well, who's doing some really interesting work about habits and thoughts as habits. And one of the really interesting exercises that I was given as I was training for the silent retreat that I did was I was given the homework assignment of mindful dishwashing at night. Now, that's a really scary time for me, actually, because the kids are in bed, my day's finished, and that's often when my rumination starts, and can quite before this project, that would be the kind of the beginning point for my insomnia. And what my teacher, when he gave me that assignment to do, I had to every single night at 8 p.m. once the bedtime stories were read, and I had a sink full of dirty dishes with congealed dinosaur pasta in my sink and whatever else. By attending mindfully to that experience instead of trying to put on an audiobook as a distraction or something, I learned pretty quickly that I was thinking the exact same thoughts every single night in front of those dirty dishes. They weren't new, but they were presenting in my mind as if I was having them for the first time. And so my mind was having these exact same thoughts, cued like a habit. Like any other habit, these thoughts were reoccurring, cued by this exact same stimulus. And it was such a breakthrough for me because those thoughts were actually really troubling thoughts, and they don't happen anymore. Now that I've seen them, now that I can kind of develop that capacity to notice. And it's funny how shining, you probably talk about this all the time, I think, in your programs, but shining the spotlight of attention on something quite often makes it disappear in the mind. Yeah.
It is amazing. It is an analogy we do use with kids that say kind of like with a flashlight, just kind of look around in there. Don't be afraid by it. Don't push stuff away. Just kind of see what's there. And somehow as you see, it becomes less scary, less troubling. And there's a lot of work that's been done on that topic where you kind of say, invite that fear in, invite it. In one of our practices, we have the angry man, sort of when you feel angry, sort of let that person in, and invite him or her to sit down and rest and try to see what they need. And with that effort, and so many kids write about that angry practice and how helpful it is for them to sort of unhook from whatever that anger might trigger in them. They don't get triggered anymore. Right? And they don't react. They just kind of allow and settle. So it's pretty incredible. And, to build on that idea of children, and I agree with you that adults really do need to come to this at their own pace. And we really believe, and hopefully as more people become aware of the field, that children can be the catalyst for this movement. right? They are very open anyway to the idea. They can practice very quickly, and when they have tools to use that they can start to practice every day, it's remarkable how they can start to inspire their parents or caregivers, their teachers, and their community members. So we see it pretty often, and we're so optimistic about the future because of that. Because we feel like if we can get all kids with access, then everything else will start to shift because people will see for themselves the power and the little ones that are running around.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to also ask you is about your training. So I noticed in the storyline that you had started with an app, and then you went to an MBSR class, and then you did a retreat, which I think is a really fantastic pathway, actually. And I just would love to get your reflections on that.
Yeah, so I started with an app, and then when that app wasn't serving me anymore, it sort of got me to a certain point, I used a different app. So I think that's an important thing too, is that, one app might work wonderfully for somebody for some time, but then you might not actually fulfill what they're looking for. But it became pretty clear to me that I needed guidance from a real teacher. Like, I just had so many unanswered questions, and I needed some real help, I guess. And that's how I progressed to the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which I did with a really excellent teacher who's also a clinical psychologist, who was just a wonderful facilitator and a really wise woman. And that was really interesting because it turbocharged my practice, not only because I started meditating for 45 minutes a day and really started noticing a difference, but also because I was meditating with other people. And I find that meditating with other people is quite a different experience. And being able to ask questions directly in the moment to a teacher was really helpful. And then after that, I really started training, I guess, more in a really dedicated way to build up to my retreat, to my 10-day retreat, which was, was extraordinary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it's funny because when we look at kids as a catalyst for some of this movement, that same kind of process makes so much sense. Kids can start with sort of a tool that's accessible and easy and even online, and then they can migrate as funds and things become available to get additional teaching and those kinds of things. We find that if, in our world, we don't want every child to have to wait to get a teacher in order to start practicing. So we feel like they can start, and then those other components can come in to play. The other thing that's really interesting is that children don't seem to grasp as much for the detail that adults do. So while a lot of adults will want to read the book, go to the class, check the box, ask all the questions, because that's a lot of how we're wired, children are much more kind of in the moment and ready to experience, and they're comfortable believing their experience and understanding it as it is without questioning, well, why is this? And children typically haven't had as many traumas as we adults have had that they have to work through. So we find that, with children, they can just start to engage and get going without a lot of fanfare. And then, the rest of it can emerge as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I'd be really interested. I'm fascinated to hear more about your program. Also, though, from a parent's perspective, because I feel like listening to you talk, I'd really like to do some kind of program where I learned about, working with my kids to teach them mindfulness, like parenting, teaching mindfulness kind of programming. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I
And
think
there's a lot out there.
Say that again.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. Yeah. Go ahead, though. Finish.
Yeah, well, I just think, so my kids are now 7 and 3, and I often wonder, like, what's the most responsible way to kind of share mindfulness with them? Their minds are so young and still forming, and my youngest, Isaac, who we call Izzy, he doesn't even have, he has no idea what rumination would be, so his habits of mind are still only just beginning. He's only just developed the ability to imagine a future and to recall a past. So his mind is almost clean and so pure and beautiful. So I'm curious to know about, how to introduce mindfulness to a mind that is like that, because I can talk about mindfulness from my perspective, which I really used as a way of handling my kind of inner suffering, I suppose, is a way to describe it. But he doesn't have that inner suffering. So I think, I'm fascinated by the work you're doing.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so we can, I'll share the tool. We're actually providing it for free to people around the world. It's we have a school-based program, but we designed a family, like a companion app, if you will. So all the programming is on it, but there's little user journeys for each of your kids. So your youngest one, Easy, could have the sort of the pre-K version, and your older one could have the elementary version. But it's based on mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. So it follows that pathway. So it'll be very familiar to you if you try it, but I'd love to have you give it a try and with your kids and see what they think. But it's really, really interesting. I will tell you one story, and I know we want to cover one or two more questions before we're done, but this is indicative of what it is for children. So there's a child that was a boy, 9 years old, in Cleveland, which is an urban, it's a city in the U.S. that has a lot of diversity and a lot of poverty and just kind of fair amount of trauma in this particular school. And the child came into school. They had been practicing, doing mindfulness with our program for a couple of months. And this boy was really like always acting out prior to this, just was at the principal's office all the time and really struggling, had a very challenging home life. So one day he came into school and he said to the teacher, I need to talk to you. Can you help me? And she's like, sure. And she kind of pulled him aside and she said, what's the matter, buddy? And he said, well, my mom got brought to prison last night and my grandma said I'm not going to see her for a really long time and I'm just really mad. And he said, can you breathe with me? And so they went over and they just did some mindful breaths together and, he settled. And then he went on with the day. And those teachers, as they tell the story, and they did it on film, it's a great little clip, but they said, for a 9-year-old kid to have that kind of a traumatic experience, to be able to articulate what he needed, to be able to participate in the solution, and then to go on with his day and be productive, like that's remarkable for even adults, right? Think about if your mother got sent to prison. It's hard even as an adult, and that child had the capacity and the resiliency and the coping skills to deal with that and move on. And that's what we see with kids all the time. These tools are so powerful for adults. They're life-changing. I didn't come to it till I was almost 30. But when we see it in kids, it's just incredible. So, we're hopeful that all of, your movie and all of this effort is going to build more awareness in the world for why we need to be doing this more. So, okay. So I did have another question about the whole connection. Is it religious? Is it not religious? I know that comes up sometimes. Can you make any comments about that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I get this question from two angles. One angle is, why have you referred to Buddhism at all? It's, this is a secular practice. This is just simply mind training. And then I get the other angle, which is, why have you stripped the Buddhism out of the story? If not for the Buddha, we would not know about mindfulness. And Buddhists are actually deeply concerned that I've stripped the kind of ethical underpinnings out of their religion and kind of made, presented mindfulness as this purely secular kind of very singular practice. So it's a great question. I guess to the first side of it, well, really, actually, it's all entirely sort of integrated in from both angles. And from my perspective, I'm a health journalist and I'm interested in finding evidence-based ways that we can approach the mental health epidemic. And you might remember in the beginning of the film, my mission was to find something that I could do and something that I could teach my kids in order to protect and nurture and nourish our minds. And it was absolutely gobsmacking to me at the beginning of the project when there was practically nothing. And that mindfulness really was the closest thing I could find to something that could be widely disseminated and practiced by anybody of any age at, with any level of education, in any circumstances, in any continent, something like the equivalent of eating healthy food, to nourish our bodies, or the equivalent of exercise for fitness, physical fitness. So that's where mindfulness came into it, and that was my perspective. So, and I'm an evidence-based health journalist. So I came at this from a scientific angle, and that's the direction that the story went, which is why there's not a lot of Buddhism in there. But as to the other perspective, which is this stealth Buddhism? Is this, am I sort of trying to sneak a religion, in without people realizing it? I've just written a book that's coming out to accompany the film, and decided that I would write an entire chapter about this because it's very important for us to explore this. And what was really fascinating when I went back into the history of it, you hear really dedicated Buddhist practitioners talk about having a lineage of teachers. And so what I did is I tracked my lineage back to see, okay, who did my teacher learn from? Who did that teacher learn from? And who did that teacher learn from? Until I went all the way back to this man called the Buddha. And what's fascinating about him is that he wasn't a Buddhist. he wasn't trying to found a religion. That came a couple of hundred years later. He was essentially the world's first psychologist. And he just sat down and he studied his mind, and then he taught other people how they too could sit down and study their minds. So I'm not a Buddhist, but I certainly respect the teachings that are there and the wisdom that's there. But as Willem Kuyken said to me recently, he's the head of the Oxford Mindfulness Centre, the director of research there, he said, the Buddha got a lot right, but he also got some things wrong. And now that we have this thing called modern research psychology, we're still learning. So we have to start somewhere. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's your perspective on that though? Because you're doing this in schools, so.
Yeah. And it's actually amazing that it does come up sometimes, and we approach it in a similar way to what you were just describing, that these practices of attending to your own thoughts and your own experiences and just being in stillness or clear movement when you're doing it is really about being human more than it's about any possible religion. And so we say it's really human first. And then people can maybe have beliefs about various things, and that's really fine. It doesn't stop or start you from being able to practice these techniques. The other thing that's interesting is that, sometimes when people are asking us, well, how do you discern like you were saying, you're stripping it of some of the values. I feel like those people may not be paying close enough attention to the research base, because in the research base, it's very clear that when you practice, even if there's not one word about gratitude or about any of those feelings or emotions, those feelings and emotions emerge anyway. They emerge naturally as we remove the stuff, right? All of the, narrative and the crazy thinking mind, and we start to get below some of that into our own essence. And we had a school in Texas that was trialing, mindfulness with their kids in a few classrooms. And we went back in and said, how's it going? And they said, the kids are behaving so much better. There's 50-60% fewer times where we have to send somebody to the principal because they're just regulating. They're focused. They're doing better on their tests. And, we're seeing all these. But they kind of sat back and they literally crossed their arms and they kind of looked at me and they said, but why are they so much nicer to each other on the playground? like, is that mindfulness too? And I sort of like chuckled because in the school setting, we don't spend a lot of time talking about, but there's great science that shows kids are more empathetic, they're more creative, they're more compassionate. And these are just natural states of being as a human. And they start to come up very naturally when kids have the time to understand themselves. And it's literally that simple. You don't need to get them into a whatever class to teach them that. We say all the time, you don't need to teach kids kindness. They are already kind. You need to remove the barriers to their kindness and it will show up. And I know you touched on that in the movie as well. And I was like, yay, that, so.
How beautiful. Yeah, yeah, divine.
Yeah. So I know we're about out of time. So this has been fantastic. I think we've gotten through all of my questions. So I just want to thank you again for taking this time with us and sharing your wisdom and just great work. I can't wait for the movie to be widely released.
Well, straight back to you. Thank you for the extraordinary work and really vital, important work that you're doing. And I promise to check out the program that you're offering for parents. I really, that's something that I would be really interested in. So let's keep in touch because I have a feeling this is going to be an unfolding conversation. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.